to have with us David Kress. David is the General Counsel for Kiwanis International. He's an IU grad and has been a lawyer for 20 years. He started his career as at a law firm focusing on litigation, employment law, and real estate. He moved in-house in 2014 and became general counsel for a non-bank mortgage company. And when the company was sold in 2017, he worked for a new company during the transition and emerge period. And then David joined us in August of 2019, which I guess he just celebrated his year anniversary. That's exciting. So like many of us, I'm sure that he spends time working from home when he's not in the office, as we are all doing during this time. But I know that some of the insurances have been updated and changed, and we've had a lot of questions in our district office as well. And I thought we would give him an opportunity to tell us what's going on. If you have questions, if you would put them in the chat. We ask everybody, of course, to stay muted. And then depending on how the sessions go, we may be able to open up for questions later. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to David.
Oh, okay. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the chance to speak with you and taking time out of your morning. Glad to be able to do this. I'm going to talk about a few areas first before I talk about COVID. I know that's the primary focus right now for everybody in the insurance, but just while I have everybody talk about the overall insurance program and, the things that I worry about the most for Kiwanis and the clubs and the districts. And so the way it works is we've got overlaying insurance that covers international clubs and districts, all the same policy for general liability issues. There's a few exclusions in there. Hot air balloons aren't covered. And the newest exclusion is, and there's a few other real weird ones, airplane rides aren't covered. The new one is COVID. And I'll talk about that at length after. But so that was the big change. I want everyone to know, because I get questions everyone asks, that wasn't a Kiwanis decision. There wasn't a situation of you could pay more and get COVID coverage. Our policy expired on October 31st, and no insurance company is covering COVID claims right now. So if you have a policy that's still going from before when COVID started, you're covered, but there's not one out there that can be bought. For those involved with Key Club schools are all losing their coverage for it. So that wasn't a Kiwanis choice. If people ask, we just can't get it. Nobody can. So that's kind of how the way the overall insurance program works. It's good to know when we're doing our events, if something goes wrong, our insurance is there and it protects us. The big areas right now, obviously COVID's a major concern. The big areas that I want to hit on, and I know Melissa McMahon's going to speak at 10:15 for those that can stay for that. That's great. She's the youth protection, she manages that area, and she's one of the unsung heroes of Kiwanis. She not only is always keeping up to date with the newest ways that predators try to gain, and the newest information and policies, which is important. A lot of people have, but the best thing about Melissa is her passion, and she's really passionate and cares about making sure we have events where kids don't get harmed. So that will always be, we serve the children of the world, and that's who we work with a lot. That will always be Kiwanis's biggest exposure area for liability. I just want to keep that in everybody's focus as we're kind of hyper-focused about COVID right now. So when we have those rules, we always have to follow them. Very important about, chaperones and how many there have to be, and, no one-on-one with youth. So every time I speak, if you ever hear me speak again, there's some people that have heard me a lot. I'll say that every time because we can't reinforce that too often. The second one is the use of the Kiwanis name. Kiwanis does great things, and we're great at building playgrounds and helping senior citizen centers and helping youth homes and doing different things. And that's awesome. And we should keep doing that. But when we're going to lend the Kiwanis name because we sponsor it with money or donations or volunteer hours, it's very important that when we're working with third parties, that we make sure that they are covering us for anything they do. So an example I use in the state of Washington in the 70s and 80s, we sponsored some youth homes for youth had gotten in trouble maybe their parents had trouble, they maybe were some small crimes, and Kiwanians didn't run the center, and some bad things happened at the center, but it was called Kiwanis Vocational Home. So that's resulted in litigation for 25 years. So when we decide, hey, that's a great project, let's help it, we should keep doing that. But we should work with wherever your district risk manager, and I see David Goodwin is on for Michigan, when we're doing those big projects saying, hey, let's do this, that's awesome, we should keep doing it. But there's really just 2 pieces of paper that we should do that and make sure they give us. And what that does is then we sponsor the Senior Citizen Center and we find out they're not doing something right a year later. We don't have to use our insurance to cover it. We want to use Kiwanis insurance for Kiwanis mistakes or accidents, not for third parties. So I want to bring that to your attention. Now I'll get to what everybody's most interested in is COVID claims. We're a meetings and events company. We have fundraisers. We try to do service projects that all involve, used to all involve until March, almost exclusively meeting in person. We've now adapted and we can do some online, which is awesome. But we still need to do some things in person. The work has to continue. So what we most want to do is COVID claims, those are negligence claims. It's just a negligence claim like anything else. When people are sued for COVID, they're sued for being reckless and not following precautions. No court is going to say, well, you had a meeting per se, so you're on the hook. What they're going to say is if you had a meeting in violation of governmental orders, I think Michigan just went down to 50 people. So if the Michigan district decides, well, I know they made that rule, but we think that's dumb and we're going to have 200 people gather, yeah, you're probably going to get a claim, because whether we agree or don't agree on restrictions in COVID, and for my job, I kind of laugh at all the political back and forth, because it doesn't matter if we agree or disagree. It's just like any other law. There are a lot of laws that we can say, I wish it wasn't like that. When the rules are made, we're allowed to grumble and we're allowed to use our right to say we don't think that's right, but we're not allowed to say we're not going to follow them. So clubs and districts, whatever in your area, the gathering sizes are different everywhere. Most places in the United States and Canada right now have mask mandates for indoor activities. The mask's obviously another big political issue. Again, for me, it doesn't matter. If there's a mask mandate and we're going to have a Kiwanis service project inside, well, then we have to wear a mask. That's the rules. If we do those things, we have a very low likelihood of having liability. And out on the Kiwanis website, if you go to it, right on the front page is coronavirus updates. If you click on that, it'll say guidelines is the first link. And it has in there all the steps to take. Number 1 is always going to be follow local laws. And that's mostly gathering sizes and masks. Again, that's not optional. It's not, we are allowed to say, I don't agree with it. We're not allowed to say, I don't agree with it, and so I'm not going to follow it. And that's where, as Kiwanians, we have a responsibility to each other. If you as an individual want to go somewhere, that's your choice. Once we gather as Kiwanians in a group, we're now a group. And so we have to protect each other. And so I can't emphasize enough, following those rules is the most important thing. There are states, I know people are on this call from all different states, I'm just going to name them. There are 9 states that have passed laws that said organizations cannot be sued for COVID. Now, there's always exceptions to that, right? I mean, that's the general rule. That doesn't apply if you decide that your fundraiser is going to be a mosh pit and everybody's going to be, right next to each other, breathing on each other. All right. That you're not going to be okay just because there's a state immunity. But if you have a normal Kiwanis club meeting, you're going to be okay in these states. And they are Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Utah, Wyoming, and Georgia. So if you're in those states, you can be a little bit more a little bit less conservative about saying, yeah, we can have this meeting as far as liability goes. Remember, each club and meeting group is different. So, the first goal is to keep each other safe and healthy. Even though it feels like this has been going on for 10 years, we're only on like month 8 or 9. And we probably have, another 4 to 6 months to go. I would say we now can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Unfortunately, the tunnel is a lot longer than we all want it to be. So we've got some time left, but this will end. So, if you're in states where there's a really high infection rate right now, it may be time to call time out and say, we're going to go back online only for a couple months. Again, I get calls all the time from clubs that say, we already had this service project planned. We don't want to really shut it down. I understand that. And those are all judgment calls that have to be made on the ground for that area. And some undoubtedly should go forward. 1, because we have to keep doing good. And 2, you make commitments to people and say, we're going to have a food drive and advertise it and say, come here. It's hard to cancel 2 days before and say, never mind, So if we've done that, great. But then wear a mask. If we're passing out food, Kiwanis International we passed out some food for employees. Wear gloves. Do everything that you can to keep it safe. And that it seems simple, but that's really the law of COVID, because it's negligence. It's a negligence claim. It's the same as if you have a train, at your club and kids use it, then you should have the train inspected. If you do everything right and something breaks, Kiwanis won't be on the hook. It's those mistakes saying we're not going to take that time, we're not going to follow the rules, that get us in trouble. As questions come in, I will put in there, I think it's pretty cool. There's a law firm out there that has a COVID tracker, and it's got it. You can just look at the surface. You can go into everything, and it shows there's all the COVID claims. This is United States only. I'll back up. The United States is the main area where we're going to get the most COVID claims, and that's primarily because other countries have more socialized medicine. So in other countries, if you get sick, you go to the doctor, you don't pay much out of pocket, there's not a claim to be made. In the United States, that's not the case, generally speaking. So, if someone got sick at an event because Kiwanis or any place was reckless and they spent $10,000, they may say, wait a minute, I shouldn't have had to spend that, you guys didn't make anybody at the meeting wear masks. So I'll put that up in the chat so everyone can see it. I'm a lawyer nerd, so some may not be interested, but it's interesting to see, not surprisingly, the majority of claims are in New York, California, Texas. Those are our big states. Michigan has got like 186. So if you think about that, that's very, very few claims. There just aren't a lot of COVID claims out there. 186 in 9 months is, for a negligence claim, there's probably 186 car accident claims a day. This is 186 in 9 months. Also, to my knowledge, there's not been one company, workplace, anybody where a court has found against that company for a COVID claim. Now, part of that's because court cases usually take 18 months, and so they haven't gotten through, but some can go faster. But generally speaking, what courts are saying is everybody knows about COVID. If the individual goes to a meeting or an event or a restaurant, they are taking a risk, and they're assuming that risk. So I just want to say that we shouldn't go into a posture of we just can't do anything till COVID's over. Now, if the rates way up at a time, maybe we have to call time out. But if it's manageable, we should still do things with the proper precautions. Kiwanis International had an event in July, and we were able to do it, and we had it, and nobody got sick, and it was a good thing to do. Kind of my last point on COVID is the COVID waiver for clubs and districts. Is if clubs are meeting in person routinely, all their members who are meeting should sign a COVID waiver. It protects us from liability. More importantly, I like it because it makes an individual reflect and say, You know, it says right on there, you're not going to blame Kiwanis. You're not going to sue Kiwanis. You may get sick, like meeting in person. I want people to have that pause and say, you know, this is my decision. We can wear masks and we can socially distance and we can do all the steps we're supposed to. And those are good precautions, but they're not guarantees. So that's the primary reason I like it. If you're doing it for your club and your meeting, you don't have to sign it for every meeting. You can sign it quarterly. You can sign one, say, for the meetings for the next quarter. And the form that's out there on the website is fillable, and you can make it so it says, you know, for the next 3 months. I wouldn't go beyond 3 months because the status changes, right? I mean, in August, we were doing better than we are now. So I would want people to understand as the infection rates go up and down, you sign that. You couldn't just sign it once until the end of COVID and say that's good, because what you sign here in November may not be what the situation is in January or February. So I think it's important and it's right to use those. And two things, I get these questions all the time, is what if someone isn't comfortable signing the waiver? That's perfectly fine. Then they shouldn't come to the meeting. You know, clubs, to the extent they can, a lot of them are doing hybrid meetings where some people want to meet in person and like that in-person contact. And some are saying, you know, you can set up a video screen in a room so that you can see people and they can still Zoom in. But if people don't want to sign, then that's a fair decision and a personal decision, but then they can't come also. We can't have a situation where some have signed the waiver and some haven't. Same thing on masks. I kind of hit on this, but you know, I really love meeting in person. I want to be part of the club, but I just don't wear masks. It offends it's against my personal liberty. I'm not wearing a mask, but I come to the meeting. And no, not right now. You don't. It's fine to have that view that it's your personal liberty and you don't have to wear a mask, but to come to the Kiwanis meeting, that's a choice you have to make. It's either the mask or you don't come. It can't be, we have these rules and then we just selectively enforce them. Now, the masks is a local issue. If you're in an area that doesn't require masks, my personal view is you should still wear them. But if it's not a legal requirement, then it's not a legal requirement. So that's the issue there. Right now, you know, when I started giving these talks 6 weeks ago, there were a lot of places that didn't have mask mandates. There are very few now that don't, for indoor events. So that's kind of a summary. The work should continue. We should keep meeting when we can. I don't know. I appreciate, Sue's introduction. I've done a lot. I never thought when I started in August 9th, 2019, I had a lot of experience that I knew would be good for Kiwanis. I had a couple areas on foundations that I didn't know much about. I had to learn more. I never thought that I would become a COVID lawyer. I never thought I'd be reading, medical journals about infectious disease. And I do all the time now to see what's going on. And I haven't seen one infectious disease doctor that doesn't think the next 2 months aren't going to be really hard with colder, especially in the colder weather climates. Those of you lucky enough to be in Florida and Texas and Arizona and places where it stays warm, you're going to do better. Doesn't mean there's not going to be some rise, but here in Michigan and Indiana, everybody says it's going to be a tough couple months. So most of the clubs I see in Indiana are going more to, we were meeting in person again, we're going back to now, remote only. But again, each club's got to make its own call. And if you want to meet in person, go ahead, just use the precautions. So I've been talking for a while now. And so I'm going to throw that website for those of you interested in the chat box, and then I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, David. I've been watching the questions in our chat here. Let me see if I can get back to the beginning of them. For those of you that are asked, yes, we are recording this program, so we will make it available. Excuse me, give me 24 hours or 48 hours to get it cleaned up as much as I can. Yeah, I'm not an expert on this, so I have to figure out how it goes all the way along the way, and we'll make that available for you. We'll make an announcement on the Kiwanis of Michigan Facebook page to show that there. I did send the COVID waiver link. I put it in the box, but if you go to the Kiwanis.org website, on the left-hand side, there's a big box that said coronavirus. And if you click on that, it takes you to things on coronavirus. One of the first questions, are club secretaries to maintain the records or send in the forms, the release of liability forms?
Is the question, are they supposed to send those to Kiwanis International?
Or to keep them? Yes.
They should keep them, but they should not send them in.
Okay, so don't send your release of liability form, your waiver forms in. And how long would you recommend people keep them?
2 years.
2 years, okay.
2 years is generally speaking the statute of limitations on negligence claims. Now that varies by state, but that's going to be the majority of them.
All right. Should waivers be signed for members and volunteers just at meetings, or should we include service projects as well?
We should include service projects as well.
Okay, so any activity that involves Kiwanis.
Now, I have an add-on to that. You know, there are some events that invite the public, parades and stuff. I don't expect that we're going to get people in a parade, everyone to sign a waiver. I mean, the rule of common sense does have to apply. If we're in a food drive where people are coming up, those are the people we want to sign. We're not going to get every car to sign.
This one is from our Canadians, and I'm thinking that they may want to connect with you. If not, you can. Does Kiwanis International have any objection with the Canadians changing the language within the waiver to conform to our laws as stated?
No, I don't. And I sent one, I don't remember, to I think it was EC&C that changed state to province, but you're welcome to do that yourself. But that is floating around in the Canada districts, if you want to ask that leadership as well.
Okay. Will Indiana beat Ohio State today? That's
well, it last happened in 1988, so I'm hopeful, but not real. It might be more hope than realism.
I think there's a lot of us out there that are hoping for that. Even us Michigan State people who have the day off, thanks to our friends in Maryland. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna open it up. If there are any other questions, feel free to unmute yourself. We just want to, or raise your hand so we know who wants to talk, so we don't get everybody talking at once. But
Robert, go ahead.
So you talked about the insurance. So if we, and I'm a little confused, if we had a policy before a certain date, we're covered. But if we had a policy after a certain date, we're not covered, or are we not covered, period, for COVID?
We're not covered now. Until October 31st, we were covered.
So we're not covered now?
Correct. That policy ran out just by its normal terms. We have year policies that go from November 1 to October 31 every year.
Right. So if the incident happened before October 31st, the theoretical incident happened before October 31st, we would be covered?
Correct.
Okay. All right. I get it now. Thank you.
Larry French.
Yes, we have a question with respect to sponsoring a Cub Scout pack. Jim Moretta's on here with me, and Jim is more involved than I, but essentially we sponsor a pack and Jim is the contact person with the people that operate the pack. We do not have any day-by-day or event-by-event participation with the pack. We just provide a sponsorship. They meet maybe once a year in our building, if not ignoring COVID for a minute, for a Pine Road Derby. But other than that, they have no participation in our building. The question, if an event occurs primarily related to inappropriate sexual activity, does this liability coverage provide us any protection?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Boy Scouts, Larry, because two things. We clubs continue to sponsor Boy Scout troops, and we should. We are an additional insured on the Boy Scouts policy. So people that have read in bankruptcy, the bankruptcy only covers claims up till whenever they filed, which was like a year ago. If there's a claim about something that happens going forward, it will just be a normal litigation. And so the Boy Scouts insurance policy and the Kiwanis insurance policy both would insure us.
Well, Well, one of our members is an attorney, and he read the Boy Scout information, and it says there's an exemption for felony activities.
I'll put my email in the chat. I'd have him email me. I have to know a little bit more about that to answer that level of a question.
Okay. Okay. Jim, do you want to step in and ask questions or add additional comments?
No, I think that covers our questions, Larry. Thank you.
Right.
Roger Frank has a question.
Yeah, back to the COVID liability. I guess there's two parts to it. There's the one is defense of the club, and secondly is payment of any claim. Will the insurance, did it cover the defense, or are we totally on our own?
You're totally on your own. It does not cover the defense.
Okay.
Daryl put a question in the chat, David. Daryl's from, for clubs in those special states like Georgia, are clubs also required to have the waiver signed?
I wouldn't say required, but strongly recommended. The law always changes, and someone can always say that law and challenge that law. So the waiver is an extra lever of protection. Again, I like it because I want someone to stop and reflect and say, am I comfortable with this? You know, I want someone to understand if I'm going to the meeting, this is my personal decision. If I get sick, I get sick. And they're not looking for Kiwanis to ensure that they don't get sick because we can't.
Thank you.
Other questions? Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, I have one more. You keep me here long enough, I'm going to have a zillion. I'm a retired emergency physician, so I'm not a lawyer, but I know a lot about liability. So our club has a pavilion in our local city park named the Kiwanis Pavilion. We don't really have any money going toward it. We every once in a while we may do upkeep or paint it, but it's voluntary. If anybody gets hurt in that pavilion, is there some inherent liability to that because our name is on it?
There could be.
Okay.
I mean, so the issue there is if we sponsor it and we still have our name on it, and cities generally cooperate, we should just ask the city to say, if something happens here, you'll defend us. City.
Okay.
All
right. Thank you.
Yep. It's a good question, Robert. And so everyone knows we have insurance either way, even if the city says no, but it's important because every claim we get, there's a $75,000 deductible. Most litigation uses that regardless of whether we win or lose. A few, probably 20% don't. But so when we're sponsoring other people's activities like a Kiwanis Pavilion, we want to get their insurance to pay because we're saving $75,000 every time, even if we're not liable. And that really adds up for all of us, and how much, what our dues go to.
I'm looking through the pictures just to make sure I'm not missing anybody's hands or them unmuting themselves. Sandy from New York. New York's one of our, New York, California, and Texas. What can we say?
the power trio. Thank you so much for hosting this morning. I do appreciate it. So David, I just want to clarify with you, because we host we sponsored back in the day a 9/11 memorial that bears our name that we have since turned over to our local town for upkeep and maintenance and so forth. Would we need to be listed as a named insured on their additional insured on their policy to ensure coverage?
We should ask. I mean, there's no harm in asking. They may say no, just as an administrative burden to them. I'd have to see the memorial. There's different levels of risk. Things that are just a static place, there's a lot less risk than playgrounds and stuff where people can fall off. But my opinion is, and I encourage, we have district risk managers that have these forms at the ready, that they're, adept at them. I strongly encourage contacting them and saying, I'm not sure exactly how this works. How do we do this? And my opinion is we should ask every time. Some places will say no. For the 9/11 memorial, I probably wouldn't change anything. If it's a senior citizen center and they say no, I'd probably say we want to reconsider whether we want to keep doing this. So you got to assess what's going on at whatever we're sponsoring.
Okay, thanks.
And I will introduce, for those of you that are Michigan Kiwanis members, David Goodwin is on with us. David, you want to do a quick wave there? He is our risk manager. I did put his contact information in the chat if you should have any questions. David, you want to say anything?
Yeah, just thanks, Sue, for doing the program. Get calls periodically from different clubs around the district with questions about what to do when they're having an event, or if they're looking into sponsoring some kind of a program, or had one recently that like a food kitchen was being shut down for lack of their support, and the club wanted to see if they could take over sponsorship on it. So we had a conversation about what's really a Kiwanis project, or what's just giving the Kiwanis emblem and insurance to an existing program without it really being a Kiwanis function. So those conversations need to happen before a club jumps into something that could be a major liability. But I'm available, and when you have questions, feel free to look me up, and we can have a conversation.
Thanks, David. I want to kind of go in full circle back to youth protection. There's levels of risk. There's, a playground. There's things when we're doing stuff with kids. That's when we really want to get. That's when we want to get the insurance certificate. When we're sponsoring other people, saying, they have a center and they're doing this, and we're like, that's great. We want to give some money, and they're going to, we'll put your name on it because that gives them credibility and their reputation. I love all that, but that's when we really need the insurance certificate. When we're working with youth, as we've seen with the Boy Scouts and the Catholic Church, unfortunately, we're not in a world where we can just trust that everybody's doing the right thing. So, if it's anything youth involved, and they don't want to give us a certificate, that's a red flag, because any reputable youth serving, they do these all the time, and they love giving them. They love support, they love donors. So anybody that's reputable, when you ask, they're like, sure, no problem. If they start to pause at that for youth-oriented activities, definitely call David or whoever your risk manager is there, or email me, because that's not a yellow flag, that's a red flag.
Thank you, David. Appreciate you being on with us this morning. Are there any other district risk managers here with us today? Unfortunately, I don't know all their names. So, David, there is some stuff in the chat from Chuck, in general chat, and I don't. That may be something that two of you guys can connect on. I'm not sure whether that's stuff that.
I saw that, Chuck. I'm going to send an email after. I've not heard of that, so I'm always open to new. We have a Kiwanis International, in behalf of the districts and club, has a broker who goes out and looks for stuff, and they've not found anything like that. So it's not uncommon that Florida doesn't come up with creative insurance solutions first, which is a good thing. So anything that's out there that's a possibility, we'll definitely explore.
Thank you. Great questions. Anything else that I know sometimes if you're like me, it takes a little while to take all this in and then go, okay, wait a minute. Now I have that question.
Yeah, and in that vein, I put my email in there. If anybody has questions after the fact that you think of after, or it's more specific, it's hard in big Zoom call to say exactly what's happening at a club and your project. If you want to ask those, I'm happy to answer them and give some guidance.
And I think I want to excuse me, I want to thank David on behalf of everyone that's here today. I think it's great that we do have a resource. In addition to our district risk managers, you know, you can check with David. Wow, to David, I just realized that, David and David. Okay, I'm slow this morning. It's cold here. It's great to be able to have contacts that we can make a phone call to. And now you know who David Goodwin looks like and what David Kress looks like, and feel free to contact them. And I know that all the communication I've ever had with them has been great for just getting answers. And sometimes you just need someone else to talk to about it, just to see whether you're thinking on the right page. And, you know, our premiums and our dues are paying for David's, his role with Kiwanis International as our general counsel, in-house general counsel yet. So please use those resources that you have available to us. You're not out there on your own. And I think that's the biggest thing for people to realize, is you're not on your own. All right, I don't see any more hands there. Any more questions? So we'll hang out. David, anybody you can hang out if you want to talk to each other, feel free to do that. I will stop the recording once we're done asking questions of David, so that I can separate this from the Kiwanis Youth Protection Program at 10:15. We will get about a half hour to go warm up your coffee or go check the news, read your Kiwanis email, go to the coronavirus website for Kiwanis.org and check that out. Or if you wish to jump off for a half hour, you can just log back into with your same login information. For this one, this will be the same for everything. So I want to thank David for being with us this morning, and thank everybody else for joining us this morning. Feel free to chit chat this morning and see where we're going. And for those of you that are going to leave us for a little while, we'll catch up with you later. So thank you, David.